Hey guys, my name is Chantal and I'm here to share some tips for having a successful hospital birth. I have had one home birth and one hospital birth. Every birth is successful no matter the outcome, but basically I just want to share some tips to make it the best experience possible. So I'm coming from the perspective that you may not necessarily have wanted to have a hospital birth for whatever reason. Maybe you intended to birth at home, but you were too high risk, or maybe you intended to birth at a birth center, but you were risked out of that as well, and you find yourself having to birth in a hospital. So we want to make that the best experience possible. So I have 3 tips for that. So my first tip is to be intentional about finding your OB. I find that a lot of women find out they're pregnant and they just, end up delivering with whoever their OBGYN was, or whoever their mom's OBGYN was, or, the person that's delivered all the babies in their family. Or just the person down the street. And while that's great and all, that might not necessarily be the right and the best doctor for you. I suggest that people do their due diligence and do their research to make sure that the person and the provider is the right fit. Because at the end of the day, yes, they're a doctor, but they are working for you. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find information on OBs or recommendations. You could join like a mom's group on Facebook and ask around. You could look up reviews. You could ask your friends for recommendations. But what I would suggest would be to try and find someone who leans more towards your values and the type of birth that you want to have, whatever that may be. For me personally, when I was risked out of a birth center and a home birth for my second child because I had high risk due to having postpartum preeclampsia with my first birth. So I ended up doing my research. I actually listened to a podcast by someone named Grace Allen, who is from Atlanta, and she found an OB because she was doing a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. And basically I took on her recommendations. I researched that particular doctor. I knew I wanted to birth at Emory because I love the Emory hospital system. That doctor was known for doing VBACs, for doing breech deliveries, and for doing twin births. And I found that doctor was more in tune and willing to listen to the woman's body and trust them to go into labor naturally, and was more of a hands-off approach for an OB. So throughout my pregnancy, I didn't have a lot of ultrasounds. I didn't have a lot of interventions. It was very hands-off, and I was very happy with the result. So that is my first tip. My second tip is to find a hospital that you feel aligns with your values, that you think is the right fit for you, or a hospital system. So, as this is America, private hospitals and different hospitals have different policies, different systems in the way they do things. I happen to really like Emory because I had a great experience there. And while Emory did not do water births, I still felt with my choice of OB, I would be able to have the type of birth that I wanted. So it's kind of like a fine balance between the OB and the hospital system. The OB has to listen to the policies of the hospital, but if you find the right OB, they can kind of be a little bit more flexible within that, which I will go into in another video when I talk about my induction and my hospital birth. But I feel that if you want to have a water birth, then find a hospital that has birthing tubs or supports water birth. Or, if you want to have a doula, find a hospital that is going to let more people come. Definitely tour the hospital. You want to be as comfortable as possible. You want to make sure there's somewhere nice for your partner to be comfortable. You want to know, their policies for the baby after the baby's born. Is there a nursery? Do they support breastfeeding? Do they have pumps? All sorts of things like that. So I highly recommend being intentional about the hospital that you're delivering at. And if you find a good OB, they should deliver at a good hospital. That'll, if the OB already aligns with your values, chances are the hospital they deliver at will also align with your values, but it's still good to do your due diligence. And my third tip would be, dun dun dun, to hire a doula. I think a doula is so vital in having a successful birth that turns out the way that you want it. If you've ever given birth before, you know that it is intense. It is intense, and you can have the best intentions, you can have the best birth plan. And when, you know, ish goes sideways, sometimes the birth plan goes out the window. And you can't really expect the nurses or the doctors when they're in survival or crisis mode to remember your birth plan. You probably won't even remember your birth plan at that point. And sometimes things happen so fast that the birth plan just is out the window. Sometimes it's life or death. So basically having a doula there is great, because a doula is trained at, you know, being at births, knowing how this goes, being able to stay calm and hold the space while everyone else is kind of in chaos, and knowing that it's their job to sort of not enforce the birth plan, but be a reminder to everyone, make sure the nurses know the birth plan, make sure everyone's on the same page. Basically, they're creating a sacred space for the birth, and that the birth plan is a big part of that. So while you're delivering, you may not be in any place to even remember your birth plan, and that's where a doula steps in. Not only does a doula help support you, not only does a doula do all the things that will help your birth be successful and follow your birth plan, but they'll also enforce the birth plan. So highly recommend having a doula. A lot of doctors and nurses, they know about the whole doula thing. They're willing to listen, and they know if you have a doula, it's almost like, I feel like it's like an unwritten sort of like respect that they have between each other. And for me personally, when I had my doula at my birth, everyone was super hands off, because they just were like, whatever, she's got her doula's taking care of her. They still checked me and everything, but yeah, I just felt so supported. So those are my top 3 tips for having a successful hospital birth. Every birth is successful, but when I say successful, I just mean going the best way possible and how you want it. So yeah, if you have any questions at all, reach out to me. I'm going to be filming another video on my having a successful induction, as I was induced with my second baby. So yeah, stay tuned. Bye.